January 2nd, 2014. Community is back. I mean, literally, Community is back on the air for the first time in 7 months with a doubleheader that constitutes 15% of the shortened season. But also, figuratively, Community is back. Dan Harmon and many of the veteran staffers are on board once again after a one-season departure, and there's no denying that despite the narrative troubles of fifth year of college present, this newest edition of the show looks and feels like Community. There's meta jokes, bittersweet winger speeches, and a Chevy Chase cameo to boot. The energy is palpable through the screen, and after Repilot and Introduction to Teaching sign off, everyone is pumped for the remainder of the season. Now in her 5th year of reviewing the show, the AV Club's Emily Vanderwerf writes, quote, "Repilot and Introduction to Teaching work because of blah 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 pointless philosophical musings, but also because they don't try too hard," end quote. With Dan Harmon back in the fold, Community seems more sure of itself and its comic sensibility than ever before. And these first few episodes have demonstrated that his version of Community still has plenty of stories to tell, which, combined with the characters we've come to know and love, should result in a fantastic season of television. In 4 short months, we'll find out if it's the last. This is the story of Community. I'm Alex Wong. April 17th, 2014. Wow, these 13-episode orders are quick. With the Season 5 finale, Basic Sandwich, Community's super senior year has come to a close. It's been an emotional roller coaster with cast shakeups and bizarre adventures to match. In other words, a normal Community campaign. But as the last episode comes to a close, the show shifts to an unusual tone. Community seems to be eternally on the bubble, never sure when or if its next episode will air. As a result, its last few season finales have essentially been formulated as if they were series finales. Their names, after all, were Introduction to Finality and Advanced Introduction to Finality. Yet, Basic Sandwich hardly feels like the capper it could possibly be, and even Abed turns to the camera late in the episode and says, quote, "We'll definitely be back next year. If not, it'll be because an asteroid has destroyed all human civilization, and that's canon," end quote. The tag to the episode, usually reserved for silly skits, is bizarre as well. The NBC logo leads off a cavalcade of fake advertisements for absurd television shows, with the final shot reading, "Depends on what fails." Hardly the message of a low-rated comedy praying for a renewal, Community is taking a clear shot at the Peacock, basically saying, look, you can throw anything you want at the schedule, like you've done the last 3 years. But we know, at the end of the day, you're not going to find anything to replace us. Even Emily Vanderwerf, a dedicated yet mostly impartial source, is more certain than not that Community will be back for a 6th season. So what makes this year different? It's certainly not ratings. The season finale drew a 1.0 same-day rating, and the rest of the season didn't fare much better, continuing the consistent year-over-year decline with an average live plus 7-day rating of 1.5. Part of the trend can be attributed to lower viewership of network television across the board, but it mostly comes down to the fact that, despite the pleas of its faithful, at its advanced age, Community is not going to be picking up many new live viewers. The show knows that, NBC knows that, and so while the objectively abysmal ratings aren't going to be a plus in renewal considerations, they're not the be-all and end-all they might be for most other programs. Instead, there are a few other familiar factors that might be responsible for keeping Community afloat. One has been at play around this time for each of the last 3 years: syndication. Community has now reached a total of 97 episodes, and a final season would put it above the century mark, a crucial number for syndication payouts. Remember, NBC will get a portion of those second-run earnings, so it may very well be worth it to produce and air 13 guaranteed episodes of Community instead of placing their hopes on a pilot that may have financial potential, but will most likely fizzle out before it can even sniff a syndication deal. And I say most likely because, once again, NBC has failed to strike gold, or even silver, with its new lineup of comedies. Let's take a survey around the schedule. Unsurprisingly, the highest numbers come after one of the network's most prominent commodities, The Voice. Its neighbors, About a Boy and Growing Up Fisher, were the only comedies on the network to top a 2.0 7-day rating, holding down 9 to 10 p.m. on Tuesdays. But as far as their prospects for the future, their numbers look a lot like their time-slot predecessors, Go On and The New Normal, and you know what happened last year. Although at least they can say they're not the Thursday block. Undoubtedly one of the motivations behind the formulation and airing of Depends on What Fails, the pilots NBC hoped would pick up The Office's viewership have actually seemed to pick up 30 Rock's viewership. Welcome to the Family was cancelled and pulled in the fall after less than a month. Sean Saves the World at least aired 13 episodes, but it had an 18-episode order and was cancelled on January 28th. The Michael J. Fox Show appeared to be the lone bright spot, starting out strong and earning a full season. But ratings tanked rather abruptly, and the show was pulled from the schedule a couple of months ago with no return in sight. It's a quite miserable state of affairs. Half of NBC's fabled Thursday night is now vacant of scripted comedies, with a celebrity game show airing in the void. Which, again, leaves Parks and Recreation and Community, hanging in there with 1.7 and 1.5 averages respectively. Just like last year, the lack of a viable alternative is one of the primary reasons why, despite the lack of positive popular momentum, Community's fate may not be sealed. Just 3 weeks ago, according to TV Guide, NBC and Sony insiders were optimistic about a 6th season, a word you don't often hear regarding Community's fate, and directors were being discussed for the subsequent movie. Dan Harmon seems hell-bent on making the mythical hashtag a reality, and despite what has felt like dozens of major scares to that end, it looks like it finally might be on its way to coming true. Of course, this is Community, and nothing is out of the realm of possibility. For all of the hope that has been accumulated since January, it's still a pitifully rated show on network television, and NBC still has plenty of reasons for cancellation. But, mercifully, it's only April, and the community will have to wait 1 month to find out their fate, to see if they can do the impossible one more time. May 9th, 2014. It's decision time in network offices across the country, and for the second consecutive year, NBC has canceled all but 2 comedies from the previous television season. The first survivor is Parks and Recreation, which has earned a 7th and final season. The second is About a Boy. Community's run at NBC is over. Soon after the announcement, the tour of appreciation begins, as the cast heads to Twitter to thank Dan Harmon, the crew, and each other. They've long called the show and the fraternity it has fostered one of the best experiences of their lives, and they're treating this moment appropriately, with Jim Rash tweeting, "Dean and Honor, thank you fans, you got us to 5. Speaking of the fraternity, they are inconsolable. So close to getting hashtag 6 seasons in a movie, their response is a mixture of depression and indignation. The one time they got their hopes up, they were hit with complete and utter rejection. They take solace in each other and vent to no one in particular, with one Redditor writing, "NBC totally Brited it." Community has been through the ringer, from the Season 3 benching to the Season 4 delay to the firing and rehiring of its creator. But this is the ultimate obstacle. This is the worst thing that could possibly happen. This is what Joel McHale tweets out the morning of the cancellation, the darkest timeline. May 11th, 2014. Community has been cancelled by NBC, but as bleak as the situation sounds, the show is not dead quite yet. Yes, its time on the Peacock is up, and there is zero chance it will be uncancelled, but in recent years, a path has emerged for low-rated but beloved television shows to have a second life. And it's on the platform on which Community is always welcome, streaming. Video-on-demand services like Netflix and Hulu built their names on distributing existing media, buying the rights to network shows and movies and hosting them for new viewers. But they're corporations forever in the pursuit of profits, so of course that wasn't enough. Unlike broadcast networks, which make money primarily off of advertising sales, most streaming services rely on monthly subscriptions for revenue. That means that decisions are built around bringing in the most new subscribers, and taking away from the competition. But by the very nature of their product, companies like Netflix and Hulu pretty much provide the same service. It is just watching TV, after all. So how do they differentiate themselves? By having content you can't find anywhere else. They spend millions of dollars snatching up exclusive streaming rights, hoping that popular shows will drive dedicated fans into their arms. Community, for instance, has lived on Hulu for almost its entire life. But there's another way to spend those millions of dollars on shows that they will not only have exclusive rights to, but also reap almost every dollar of profit from. Shows that they make themselves, otherwise known as original content. And the major players have both joined the market. Netflix began distributing independent films in 2006 and has continued to expand its operation ever since. Hulu's first original scripted programming hit the platform in 2012, and it too seems to enjoy the benefits. This is the way of the future, and as more and more people cut the cord or use streaming to supplement cable, these originals will gain increasing prominence in television circles. But making brand new original content requires a lot of work and money, and there's no guarantee that a given project will catch on. Because they're subscription-based, the ideal show for a company like Netflix or Hulu to produce is one that comes with a built-in rabid fan base that will watch their show wherever it airs. It doesn't have to be massively popular or friendly to advertisers. It just needs to attract people that will have no hesitation shelling out a monthly fee. Sound familiar? Given its history and dedicated fans, it makes sense that Community's most likely final season could be on a streaming service. And providing even more hope is the fact that there's already a precedent for a smart network sitcom being reborn off of traditional TV. The cultiest of cult classics, Arrested Development. The quick-witted comedy about a wealthy family who lost everything went through many of the same trials as Community. Its second season order was shortened from 22 to 18, and its third season finale ran opposite the Olympics, which is the ultimate ratings juggernaut. Except, during its initial run, it didn't even have much of the same luck as its spiritual successor. Despite its fervent online following, Arrested Development was cancelled by Fox in 2006 after only 3 seasons and 53 episodes, leaving a movie as the final hope for its fans to see their treasured characters once more. And for years they were left hanging, with rumors swirling but not much of substance being confirmed. Then, in 2011, after half a decade, forever in the world of television, Netflix revived the show, producing not a movie, but an entire 4th season. The comedy community was ecstatic, and though Netflix had to work around the actors' increasingly busy schedules, it ended up producing and airing 15 full episodes in 2013. It's left open the possibility for a 5th season as well, and while opinions on the quality of Arrested Development's post-broadcast run vary, most fans are just happy to see it back on their television screens. So based on recent events, Community appears to be a prime candidate to be picked up by Netflix or Hulu as Sony shops the show around. The fans know it too. They're organizing campaigns on Reddit to flood Netflix and Hulu's customer service lines, in addition to starting hashtags to get their attention. It's already resulted in thousands of calls and emails, and the numbers will continue to grow as the movement picks up steam. But while enthusiasm is off the charts, early reports are rather disheartening. Netflix was always going to be a hard sell as a landing spot for Community because Hulu owns exclusive streaming rights, so Netflix would only gain access to the episodes they produced. And now reporters for Deadline and Variety announced that a deal with Netflix is not likely to happen. Even though that's not nearly definitive enough of a statement to stop the flood of emails and Twitter mentions, it's not a great sign that just 2 days after the initial cancellation, Community's momentum is headed in the wrong direction. The next day, Dan Harmon finally breaks his silence on the search for a new home, as the fans' voices have reached a steady roar. On his blog, Dan Harmon Poops, he first denies any rumors that he is the one standing in the way of a sixth season. Quote, "I will confess that when Sony called me on Friday with the news, there was a brief discussion at the end of the call about the concept of the show living elsewhere, and I was definitely in the column. But it doesn't matter right now why I'd be lukewarm or if my reasons would be valid. What matters is, I won't be lukewarm. I'll heat up. I said on a Friday afternoon. I will change it to a sure let's talk on Monday morning and Sony can do their thing." End quote. Then he tries to calm the nerves of the restless faithful. Quote, "I honestly think you can totally sit back and relax for this chapter. I know you don't feel relaxed, but you don't have to worry that someone on this planet isn't aware of this show's value to its audience." End quote. Insightful as always, he recognizes that what happens to Community over the next few months is mostly out of his and the fans' hands. But a deal must be reached by June 30th, when the cast contracts expire, and the clock is ticking. So while everyone wants the show back, a steep uphill battle lies ahead. May 28th, 2014. Just 1 month ago, new Hulu CEO Mike Hopkins announced a plan to quadruple spending on original content in the following year. With Community on the market and ripe for the picking, it seems they may have their chance to deliver. And today, reports are emerging that Sony and Hulu are in talks. They're just talks, no actual negotiating is happening yet. But a sixth season pickup is still very much on the table, and Community fans are eating it up. From the date of the cancellation, it's been well known that a move to Hulu would make a lot of sense. To start, Hulu is the only streaming service that would be able to air their new episodes in conjunction with the existing Community catalog. And that catalog has been invaluable. Part of the fans' ire toward NBC and network television in general is that the show has clearly demonstrated its worth in areas outside of Nielsen ratings. Obviously, there's the online buzz surrounding the show, but it's also done extraordinarily well in streaming. According to analytics firm SimilarWeb, while Community's fifth season was posting numbers that were mediocre at best on NBC, it was a top 10 show on Hulu and the number 1 show in January in terms of page visits. So Hulu is clearly a big fan of the show, and would be thrilled to have the next chapter all to itself. Plus, Hulu needs to make a dent in the original content market. Netflix has jumped out to a clear lead, from its pickup of Arrested Development's 4th season to entirely new shows like House of Cards and Orange is the New Black, which, after only a few seasons, are on the shortlist for Emmy nominations and have brought plenty of prestige to the label of Netflix Original. To make matters worse, if it's not careful, Hulu could be in danger of falling into 3rd place in the streaming game for a long time. E-commerce giant Amazon is already in its 2nd pilot season, and it's got mountains of cash, bankrolling 5 new series last year. Hulu needs a hit, and not only are Community reruns already popular, but hosting new episodes would also introduce thousands of fans and dozens of critics to the rest of Hulu's growing original content library. There's just one problem. Community was a poorly rated broadcast sitcom for 5 seasons, but it was a broadcast sitcom for 5 seasons. Regardless of how negotiations transpire, Community will come at a heavy cost. Vulture's Joseph Adalian believes it would most likely be Hulu's most expensive deal yet. And as Adalian writes about Hulu's new head of content, Craig Erwich, quote, "Because he's new, Erwich might want to focus his time, energy, and most importantly, financial resources on new projects, rather than picking up something discarded by NBC." End quote. Community will last at most 2 more years, and the fear is that while investing heavily in a known commodity will generate buzz now, it could set Hulu back for years in the arena of completely original content that could be with the service for the long haul. So while a deal with Hulu may happen, there's still plenty of conversations that have yet to occur. And to get back on TV, Community needs all of them to go right. June 24th, 2014. With less than 1 week before the cast contracts expire, there is still no deal with Hulu. Anxiety is through the roof, and as conflicting reports make the rounds, it shoots into the stratosphere. At 5:46 a.m., TV Line hears that Hulu and Sony are no longer talking, crushing hopes across the fanbase. But a mere 7 hours later, the Wrap reports that talks are still ongoing, bringing it back to a fever pitch. Longtime Community devotees are used to the whiplash by now. Of course, this is how revival talks are going. But TV Line and the Wrap's opposing articles agree on one thing, which they phrase as mysteriously as possible. Someone else is looking to pick up Community. Both cite an anonymous source, and both include very few details, simply referring to the third party as another player and one other entity, respectively. It's a footnote to the Hulu discussions, but with 6 days before June 30th, any news is important news. The fate of hashtag 6 seasons in a movie relies on it. June 30th, 2014. The cast contracts expired today, and there is still no deal with Hulu. No meaningful reports about the negotiations have been published in the last 5 days, and the flame of hope is nearly extinguished. The fans are preparing themselves for the worst. Barring an 11th hour renewal, actually this would be more like an 11:59 renewal, Community's run will be officially over by the end of the day. The morning comes and goes, with no news arriving. The afternoon comes, then, at 2:45 p.m., out comes the unthinkable. Not an obscure article, not a poorly sourced report, but a definitive statement. Community has been picked up. The 6th season will happen, and it will happen on Yahoo Screen? In a move no one could have anticipated, this relatively unknown 1-year-old streaming service will be responsible for producing the possibly final 13 episodes of Community's historic career. Immediately, tsunamis storm across the pop culture landscape, as long-suffering Community fans release months of pent-up apprehension. After the most last-minute of last-minute renewals, this is no time for details, and Dan Harmon's press release is about as euphoric and snarky as he gets, quote, "I look forward to bringing our beloved NBC sitcom to a larger audience by moving it online. I vow to dominate our new competition. Rest easy, Big Bang Theory. Look out, Bang Bus," end quote. For the first time since the cancellation on May 9th, Community fans can rest easy, having been through the toughest of journeys and having come out the other side. Triumphant, they celebrate their show, because as Joel McHale pronounces, the reports of our cancellation have been greatly exaggerated. Community is making its way to Yahoo Screen for an improbable 6th season. And while the cast and crew are committed to making the Community that the fans know and love, by virtue of being on a streaming platform, the show will look a little bit different. The most obvious change is that the constraints of network television are no more. Due to the tightly packed nature of broadcast schedules and the importance of scheduled ad breaks, 22-minute, 3-act episodes are an unwavering standard on networks like NBC. But by its very nature, streaming requires no such limit. So while, sure, you don't want each installment to be an hour long, scenes that would have normally been cut for time can finally make it in and have some room to breathe. Most restrictions on content are also lifted because on streaming, pretty much anything goes. Will Community use its newfound freedom liberally and drop 20 F-bombs an episode? Probably not. And these characters are so well established by now that any drastic changes would seem unrealistic and off-putting. But the platform shift does add an extra dimension of unpredictability, and knowing Dan Harmon, he will certainly try to exploit it. Much will remain the same in this new iteration of Community, from the showrunner to the sets to Yahoo Screen's presentation of the show, which, like network television, is free with ads. But of course, this season is going to feel different. I mean, literally, the cast is shooting at a new lot in a basement at CBS Radford. But Community will also be airing later in the television year than ever before on a brand new home, and with the amount of time left before the premiere, it's almost a given that more change is coming. September 30th, 2014. The last 2 seasons have already seen the departures of 2 starring cast members, Chevy Chase and Donald Glover. And now, a few months after the Yahoo pickup, one more member of the study group is on their way out. Yvette Nicole Brown will not be a part of Season 6 of Community. Brown will be leaving to take care of her ill father. The departure is amicable. After expressing that the shooting days were simply incompatible with her family situation, she was released from her contract as desired. Brown won't be disappearing from TV. She's landed a recurring role on CBS's The Odd Couple, which, as a multi-camera sitcom, has far lighter hours, and she's hinted that she's open to appearing in an episode or two. But the Greendale 7 has now been whittled down to the Greendale 4. Which leads to the question, what will Season 6 even be about? Some of the characters are still taking classes, though that's become less and less of a focus as the show has progressed. The Save Greendale Committee was Season 5's arc, but Greendale has now been saved. And with Shirley out of the picture, what stories are there left to tell? With Joel McHale, Gillian Jacobs, Danny Pudi, Allison Brie, Jim Rash, and Ken Jeong all signed on, there's still plenty of comic potential, and the fans will watch no matter what. But once again, the executive producers of Community have a challenging task up ahead. November 10th, 2014. With Jonathan Banks and John Oliver both busy on other projects, the former on the Breaking Bad spin-off Better Call Saul and the latter on his new HBO late-night show, Last Week Tonight, two of Community's most prominent recurring players from last season are gone. But today, two of Community's most prominent recurring players for next season make the trip to Greendale, Paget Brewster and Keith David. Brewster is best known for her 6 years spent on the crime drama Criminal Minds, but like Banks, she's done her fair share of sitcom work, including on massive hits like Friends, 2.5 Men, and Modern Family. In fact, she's already even been on Community. Just last year, she played Deborah, the IT department head, and she'll be playing a different role this time around. Some convenient fodder for the meta-happy writing staff. David's most unmistakable quality is his voice. His Emmy-winning voice, which earned its title from its voiceover work in The War, a World War II series by one of the most famous documentarians of all time, Ken Burns. In an odd coincidence, he too has previously appeared on Community, providing the stirring narration for the Season 3 Ken Burns spoof, Pillows and Blankets. Most recently, he was on the Fox military comedy Enlisted, which, despite critical acclaim, lasted only one season. The additions of Brewster and David continue the trend of casting actors that thrive in a variety of settings and genres, a must in the chaotic, shape-shifting world of Community. But it also opens up myriad story opportunities, and with the announcement of Brewster's role as a consultant hired to fix Greendale, the mysterious 6th season is finally beginning to take shape. January 13th, 2015. After 7 months, Season 6 finally has a premiere date, March 17th, 2015. And as the news comes down, for many Community fans, it really starts to sink in. We made it. Regardless of what happens during or after these 13 episodes, we made it to 6 seasons. It took 5 years of watching the show suffer in the ratings against the strongest competition on television, and it took a literal cancellation followed by a 2-month period where it genuinely felt like we would never see another new episode of Community. But we have completed the first half of the prophecy, with just the movie left to go. This season is for those fans, the ones that have stuck with Community through thick and thin and supported the show as much as any group of fans has supported any show in the history of television. They may criticize it, lash out at it, and occasionally threaten to leave it, but at the end of the day, they will unconditionally love it. And on March 17th, as they sit down on their couches to watch the first episode of Season 6, they're ready for one last ride. Thank you for listening to the story of Community. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're binging along, listen to the next episode after watching Season 6 of the show. To watch the podcast after show, the epilogue, featuring myself and other community podcasters, along with the articles, interviews, and other sources referenced in this episode and a complete transcript, visit bit.ly/thestoryofcommunity. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at storyofcompod, on Instagram at thestoryofcommunity, and on the community podcast Discord at bit.ly/podcastcentral. The Story of Community is written, produced, and edited by me, Alex Wong. Music is composed by Alex Wong and played on MuseScore using the Chateau Grand sound font by John Neubauer. I'd like to give a shout out to the Community Podcast Network for their assistance throughout this project. You can find links to all of the other fantastic community podcasts on the same website, bit.ly/thestoryofcommunity. Also, special thanks to Deborah Wong, Evan Angler, and Chris Revel at Let's Chat Media for their feedback and advice. On the research side, thank you to the Wayback Machine at archive.org and the Reddit search tool at camas.github.io/reddit-search for saving me countless hours of fruitless digging. This podcast is produced using Adobe Audition and distributed through Spreaker. See you next episode.